Gonna grab some water.
A dog that's like out to, you know, chew anybody up.
It's so nice that it's not.
Coming towards it.
Oh, where are you?
All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:01. First item on the agenda for tonight, Charlotte Fall Festival. You're up.
Hello. So this year, the Fall Festival is going to be basically like last year. We were planning on having it the 24th of September. Right in front up here, it's going to be outside on the street like it normally has. But what I gave you is the different vendors. We're going to have quite a lot of food vendors this year and also a lot of non-food vendors. There's going to be a lot of kids' games. We're trying to keep that real nice fall festival going. I talked to the police chief a couple minutes ago. I came in earlier today. They're going to check and make sure, start a permit process just after we get an okay here. It's going to be from road closure, would be from 4:30 to 7:30. So the actual event's going to be from 5 to 8, but the road closure would be by 4:30 to 8. So it would be 4 hours at least.
You don't want to go till the full 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock is far, and yes. 8
No,
o'clock.
for the road closure. Why would you close the road between 7:30 and 8 if the event's still going?
What did I say?
4:30 to 7:30.
Yeah, that's going to stay until 8 o'clock.
So 8 o'clock, 4:30 to 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay, okay, great. Questions? Concerns? Issues? Great. I have it as, this is all part in coming under the celebration committee this year, correct?
Yes.
Great. Great. Okay.
Do you have any extra funding needs that you've anticipated, or do you think you'll be able to stay within?
So our budget is a little tight, but depending on what the police detail is, I think that if we do need any fundraising, I'll go ahead and do it.
Anything else? Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. All right, that's nice and fast. Next up, discussion on the Vernon Family Farm. So this item came up last meeting. We had a conversation with the consultant to the planning board, Glenn Greenwood, who provided us with information and a memo on concerns that the planning board had regarding what's going on at the farm and your new facility there. We thought it appropriate to have you discuss this with us. The two items raised were one, whether the facility should have come under site review with the planning board, and the planning board raised questions about the farm stand. Why don't we, if you want, I think we provided you a copy of Glenn's memo and the background information, along with the minutes of the planning board and the select board meeting. So why don't we let you address some of the issues that came up and we can have a discussion about it.
I'm going to start out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Amy Manzelli. Feel free tonight, as we're having this discussion, to address me as Amy. We've over the last name part, so feel free to just kind dispense with that. I'm a lawyer from BCM Environmental Land Law, and I've been working with Vernon Family Farm ever since the opening in the 2014-2015 timeframe. Before I get too far along here, I brought what I'm hoping will be a helpful resource. I know you're a 3-member board, but I brought 5 copies, so just feel free to take one and pass those around. It's just a toolkit about the local regulation of agriculture that I helped put together with the Coalition for Sustaining Agriculture a few years ago. It just goes over a lot of the applicable laws, and it might be a helpful resource, especially there's a flow chart on page 7 that might touch on some of the discussion topics that we go over tonight. Now, I do want to give the legal disclaimer, it's a few years old now. Some of the statutes mentioned in here have been revised, but I still think it's a very helpful framework, so I thought that that would be helpful. Let me get to my notes here. All right. So we understand, as you mentioned, the planning board has expressed some concerns. Big picture, the Vernons have been trying to, and they believe they have complied with all of the applicable legal requirements at every step of the way since the 2014-2015 timeframe when they started their farm. I worked with them since they got in touch with me last week about tonight's meeting to gather all of the permits and approvals that we could get our fingers on, which is real quick here. So I've got their, certificate of formation of their farming business, the planning board notice of decision regarding site plan being required for the farm stand, then the Conservation Commission approval of the agriculture-related structures going in 2015, the site plan approval of the farm stand in 2016, and so on and so forth. It's about, a dozen or 15 or so items. So they've done, tons and tons of work over the years from 2014 all the way through including 2022 to try to be, and they believe they are, in compliance. But we are here tonight because obviously there are some questions. So we want to tell you what we think we know about compliance, and then we want to ask for some clarification. Before I go much farther, Jeremiah and Nicole have prepared a statement. Obviously, this is their livelihood that we're talking about, and so they have put together some prepared remarks about what it is that they think we are doing at Vernon Family Farm. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremiah to read that. Just so, ma'am, taking the minutes, just so you know, I asked them to bring a hard copy for the record so that you know you don't have to try to get it all verbatim. So once they get through that, you'll get that. Okay? Jeremiah, go for it.
All right. Thank you to the Select Board for providing advance notice for today's meeting, and we appreciate your time and thoughtfulness on the issues we'll be discussing today. Vernon Family Farm is driven by passion. It is a passion for local food and an open, welcoming, and private community that makes Vernon Family Farm what it is today. A farm that grows and sells food while creating a safe and welcoming space for community members to engage with the question, where does your food come from, and the statement to know your farmer. Big ag and big business have successfully hidden the food chain and the farmer from the public, thus creating a substantial knowledge divide between growers, consumers, and regulators. To sell the food we grow not only requires us to grow the actual food, but to also educate our community on what farming and food production actually looks like. In addition, federal subsidies and regulations have made it impossible for small growers to even come close to matching cheap big ag prices. My point is, to compete with big ag and big business, local farmers are forced to develop unique ways to entice customers to their farms and products, and we are no different. Agritourism is a fundamental and necessary part of many successful farms in Illinois. This is why you see corn mazes, hay rides, sunflower mazes, petting zoos, farm dinners, farm stores, farm tours, and many more offered at many of the farms in our existing community. Although many of us farmers prefer to simply grow food and sell food, it is often financially unsustainable to do so. Beautiful moments happen when we invite and encourage the community to engage with the local food chain. At the dinners we serve at our farm, customers enjoy a piece of fried chicken while seated within 100 feet of where that animal is raised. Your senses are engaged, sights, sounds, and smells are unique to the place. As one customer put it, this setting is quintessential New England. Kudos to the Vernon Family Farm for creating this wonderful New Hampshire venue. Many customers found us during COVID, when many of our community members felt unsafe visiting traditional grocers. When I say we fed the community, I mean we fed the community. We had lines out the door. Our farm was a refuge for people during uncertain times. One customer wrote, "My family loves this farm. We've been buying our chicken from them in bulk since 2020 when we saw meat shortages during New Hampshire. Not only is the chicken fantastic, but the store is always stocked with a ton of great local products. We also love to walk around the farm on the path created for this purpose and enjoy seeing the animals living well. Thank you, VFF." We grow and sell food. To do this, we hire 20-plus employees, we raise thousands of animals, we serve goods from over 40 local farmers and makers in our store year-round. We create value-added items such as rotisserie chicken, fried chicken, pot pies, soups, broths, and more. We host dinners and serve ready-to-eat meals. We welcome and encourage you to sit, slow down, and look around. Walk the farm, see the animals, ask questions, engage with the knowledge that eating requires sacrifice and hard work. Vernon Family Farm provides food security to our town, employs our neighbors, and invests tens of thousands of dollars in local economy. We should be encouraged, celebrated, and supported. We hope that at the conclusion of today's meeting, we can return our focus to doing what we do best, growing food and creating food. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, so with respect to the operation of the farms, the farm stand use is permitted outright in the residential agricultural district as an accessory to farming. That's in accordance with the state RSA 2134A3 and the town's definition of farming in the zoning ordinance section 2.1.11. The farm obtained the site plan approval for the farm stand from the planning board on July 16, 2015. One of those conditions is pursuant to the state law definition of the farm stand, at least 35% of the gross sales generated by the sale of products is produced by the farm. So we understand from the materials that we referenced that there's a question of the farm's compliance with this condition. And the farm can definitely demonstrate, and we are here to affirm, that the gross sales of farm-produced products sold at the farm stand do exceed 35%. It's important to note that the town's zoning ordinance and relevant state statutes provide no guidance on the frequency or method by which the farm must demonstrate compliance with this threshold. So that's one of the things when I mentioned that we're seeking clarity, that's one of the things we're seeking clarity on. So for example, I assume that the town is not saying that it wants the Vernons to produce and that the town wants to review 7 years worth of inventory and financial data to verify the 35%. I mean, that would be terribly onerous and burdensome. So if the affirmation tonight of compliance with the 35% is not sufficient, then we just need to come up with a reasonable method to do that. And we need to mention too that the farm stand has been in operation since 2015, and this is the first request for financial reports, inventory records, or whatever it is that the town is going to ask for, if you are going to ask for anything further, to demonstrate this compliance. So the Vernons are left to wonder what exactly is the impetus for enforcing this condition at this time. As far as they know, nothing has changed that would have been different now versus, last year or 5 years ago. And left to wonder, has the town required other farm stands to demonstrate compliance with this standard? Is there a constitutional equal protection issue where similarly situated farm stands are not being asked to demonstrate compliance, but Vernon Family Farm is? So as I mentioned, on this requirement, if the verbal confirmation tonight is not sufficient, we ask that the town allow the farm to demonstrate compliance with this requirement in a reasonable manner. and that the town agreed to a method of demonstration that respects the confidentiality of the farm's financial records, keeping in mind that by operation of law, the very second Vernon Family Farm provides documentation to the town, it becomes a public record, which we can all understand one's private business records, one often does not want those to become public information. Please keep in mind New Hampshire RSA 672(1) Roman 3b, which says that agricultural activities and agritourism shall not be unreasonably limited by the use of municipal planning and zoning powers or by the unreasonable interpretation of such powers. So that's our summary of the farm stand issue, confirmation that the farm meets the 35% requirement, and if the town is going to require any further demonstration of information, that we keep that reasonable. With respect to the question of site plan approval for uses other than the farm stand, the farm is located, again, in the residential agricultural zoning district, where, quote, farming, produce, commercial, and also commercial greenhouses are permitted uses outright. That's in Schedule 1, Section 3.4. And the zoning ordinance defines farming as all operations involved with the growing of crops, raising of animals, and any activities associated with marketing products, including agritourism and other activities under the state statute, RSA 2134A. And that's all in that section I referenced earlier, 2.1.11. So the Vernons purchased in 2014 for use as a farm. Historically, the property has been used as a farm, so there was no change in use there. And then in 2015, there was a determination made that for the farm stand, the retail operation, the farm stand, the limited site plan approval process was needed. They did that, and as I mentioned, that was approved unanimously. But when that process happened, it was obvious, and the record at that time reflects, that Vernon Family Farm was farming the land. And there was never site plan required for the farming operations. It was required for the farm stand operation. When you look at the definitions in the state law, agritourism is part of farming, but farm stand is not. It is a separately defined activity. My understanding at the time, and my understanding still to this day, is that is why that was the farm stand was treated separately.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you define agritourism for me? Because I don't think I really understand what that means.
Yep. This is the state law definition of agritourism. Marketing or selling at wholesale or retail, regardless of the manner or form of the transaction, any livestock or products derived principally from the production of the farm, including but not limited to items in subparagraph A, whether on-site or off-site, provided that marketing such products is not specifically prohibited by local regulations. For the purposes of this section, marketing shall include agritourism, which means attracting visitors to a farm to attend events or activities that are accessory uses to the primary farm operation, including, but not limited to, being provided a meal, making overnight stays, enjoyment of the farm environment, education, which shall be instruction or learning about the farm's operations, or active involvement in the activities of the farm.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's been what agritourism means has been a hot topic in the state for a number of years. So that's the legal definition within the state statute. Also, in 2015, it's important to note that the Conservation Commission obtained gave permission for the farm to install agriculture-related structures. And as you know, the Conservation Commission cannot own the conservation outright. It's the select board that owns it, and it's managed and controlled by the Conservation Commission. So again, this was knowledge on the part of the town that farming, which includes agritourism, was happening at the farm, and, you know, no topical site plan being required for those operations.
So, I'm sorry.
That's
So,
okay.
we have two different site plan issues, I guess. We've got the farm stand, correct, and then the farm and the farm lands, correct? They're two separate.
So one question is, and again, we're looking for clarification. So one question that was raised is the farm complying with the farm stand site plan approval condition of 35%? Our answer is yes, they are. They are aware of it. They keep track of it. They are compliant with it. And we are hoping that our testimony here tonight is sufficient to demonstrate that compliance, and that that's the end of the story for that issue. If that is not the end of the story for that issue, then we are hoping to work with the town to develop a sensible and private way of providing whatever it is we all agree makes sense to prove that. That's the 35% farm.
I just want to say, I agree with this. I think it should be 35%.
Yeah.
We don't want our capacity to go to the farm.
Right.
And I'm for this.
So the other issue is, there was mention of serving food and having events and having the public come to the property in John's memo. And whether that was ever permitted, is that allowed? And our position is it has never been permitted through a site plan process because it doesn't need to be.
Because it
It's
falls under
part
that.
of farming. And farming is permitted by right. Okay, I see a hand going up, but I have one more thing. So the last thing is the question of work being performed without a building permit. So in 2021, the farm sought and was issued a building permit to construct a 24 by 32 foot pad. So they built that. And then in 2022, the farm consulted with the town's building inspector about what approvals would be required to install a roof and partial walls over and at the pad. At that time, the building inspector informed the farm that no building permits would be required because it is an agricultural structure. The building inspector also informed the farm that the pad that was constructed pursuant to the permit, as the permit was applied for and granted, was located partially in the state right of way. As I mentioned earlier, the farm is committed to adhering to local regulations, building codes, but the farm has relied on the town staff to provide direction on what codes and approvals apply. To provide some further information, the installed pad is used by the farm for storage of equipment and for use during events and activities as part of the agritourism activities that I talked about earlier. So given the reliance on the guidance from the town, we would be looking for, further clarification on exactly what violation or what remedy, what is being looked for from the farm with respect to that. So that's all the information I have. As I mentioned, I have this stack of various business formations, state permits, DOT permits. I didn't, it's kind of a big pile. I didn't make a full copy for all of the board members because I wasn't sure, what would be helpful and what would just be more bigger than you need. So we're here to listen and learn what will be helpful for the board with respect to these concerns. Thank you for all your attention to this, and we do want to hear more from you on this.
Thank you very much. I'll start in with some issues, or at least my understanding of kind of the historical review that you provided. In the discussions with the building inspector, and I know there are other members of the planning board here, so please chime in if I'm remembering this incorrectly. But the building inspector, in this dealing with the second issue, brought to our attention on the planning board the concerns about the structure in question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not on the conservation grant. That structure is actually not part of the conservation grant itself.
I believe that that's correct.
Yeah. That's what I thought. It's on the main property. Yeah. Okay. Just again, I just want to make sure that we're clear on this.
I'm going to piggyback onto that.
Go ahead.
The 2015 approval by the Conservation.
By the way, this is Jeff Kuchar, Chairman of the Planning Board.
Chair of the Conservation Commission. None of the areas that we're speaking about tonight are on the east. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm raising as well.
Thank you.
So, I don't think there's any concerns that have been raised, certainly not at the planning board level or at this board level at this time, with respect to the use of the conservation land. So, this was raised by the building inspector in his discussions with the planning board. He conveyed his recollection of the two permits that were asked for. One for the platform to hold coolers at the time, the raised deck, and then the second was for a lean-to roof, as he described it. There was nothing about public use of that facility and actually that's what raised his concerns, was that nobody had indicated when they were discussing the permits that this would be used for the public. It would be used purely for the coolers and for storage or farm activities. And that with the general public, and now it looks like the utilization of it for serving food and for a bar, the questions were raised, well, there's now a public use to this that appears to go beyond the use of the farm, and that we now have potential health and safety issues, questions about whether proper footings were done to the deck, any electrical that is there, was it properly done and inspected, it was not inspected, are there cooking areas in there, are there fire hazards, and I think as the board, as indicated in our last meeting, there's now a health safety concern here that if something happens in the public use of that structure, the town was aware of it, but did nothing to basically ensure that it is safe for the general public, that there's a liability now for the town and everybody in this town if something goes awry at that. And so that's the genesis, and I think how we came to where we are today. So to your point that you raised earlier, it's my understanding 2015, the farm stand went for site review. We have now another structure that has been used by the general public, but that you did not go for any, even cursory discussion with the planning board about what the use of that structure was going to be, about the actual structure itself, because it certainly sounds like it's been enhanced beyond what was discussed with the building inspector. It wasn't inspected in terms of use for the general public, and so these are the questions that I think that we have and want to understand why, if this was going to be used for have a use for the general public, town was never informed, the planning board was never informed, the building inspector was never informed, and this raises some serious concern with some of the members of the board. Bill Reserve, also on the planning board?
Yeah, I'm a member of the planning board. I've been through this whole thing with Vernon's. I'm also a farmer. And I think one of your questions was, why haven't other people in town been, brought in for 35%? That's one issue. Part of it, I think, because Vernon's the only one. As far as the building goes, the way that kind of the history on all of this was, the planning board, Jeremiah had come before the planning board way back in 2015, and we told him he needed to do a site plan, and that was under discussion. We then the planning board got a letter from you, Amy, saying, no, they don't need to do a site plan because it's existing, they're going to use that building as agriculture and the farm as agriculture. The town then produced an administrative order which told the farm that, no, you need to come in for site plan review. One interesting thing in your letter to the town, you say to the planning board, maybe you should read the letter, Amy, because you say right in your letter that before a change or expansion of non-residential use, before any construction, land clearing, or building development is begun, they need to come before the town to get the permit and site plan. You said that in your letter. And then a follow-up to that was, then the Vernons came into the planning board.
Was that the 16 March?
Yes.
16 letter?
Then the Vernons came into the planning board, and the last time the planning board saw them, I'm just trying to find it here. I think the application said, this is a site plan review for Vernon Family Farm. Utilize existing farm building for the purpose of operating a farm store. Product display benches may be erected outside and near store entrance. At least 35% of gross sales will be generated by the sales of products produced by the farm. Estimated customer traffic to and from the store on a daily basis, 5 cars. Estimated hours of operation, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. After that, Jeremiah came back, the planning board said, okay, 8 p.m. is fine. The last bullet here is, when necessary, all improvements, alterations to building will include a permit followed by an inspection by the necessary town officials. So that's where the planning board was on this. We have to live with this ordinance. And I think we're talking the building, which from somebody who's been in major building construction all my life, I'm very concerned that the public is in a building that is not possibly built. I've seen people electrocuted, I've seen structures fail. I know I would not want to go into a building. I've seen some tragic things happen in buildings, and I think the town's at risk, and as a taxpayer, we're all taking risks. And then I have more to say on the 35% after this.
Well, if I can, I think one of the points, Bill, that you're raising is something that I had a concern with, which is the language regarding any new establishment, reestablishment after abandonment or significant expansion of a farm stand, retail operation, or other use that you referenced is actually under state statute 674-32B, which seems to me that what we're talking about should have required, at a minimum, coming before the town to have a discussion about the use of that building, what should or should not have been permitted or inspected, and making sure that it complied with, at least, if not the town ordinances, the right of way. If it had come before the planning board, that issue would have been addressed probably at the planning board. So we now have a structure in the state right of way. We have a structure being used by the general public that hasn't been inspected or any assurances that it's up to code. And it certainly appears to me that under the state statutes, that type of establishment, expansion, etc., would actually require them to come before the town. So while I'm certainly sympathetic to the idea of promoting agritourism here in town, and I think we have several people around town who do this, my concern is that we have a situation where the rules haven't been followed and we have a structure that may potentially be a hazard to the general public and is being used by the general public. And I don't think we can just gloss this over, because the precedent it sets is a very bad one in my opinion. So that's where I'm coming from on this. I will let my other board members speak, and then, let me really quickly talk about the 35%. The reason I think the 35% issue was raised is mainly due to, back in, I think it was several months ago, you came for a liquor license before the planning board. And planning board supported that, the town wrote a letter and supported that liquor license. And the discussion centered around the idea of, well, if he's having a liquor license, he's going to be selling wine and beer there. I presume they're not, I'm not aware of them doing wine and beer at that facility. What would the percentage be at that point in time? And would they actually start to violate the 35%? So I think that's the rationale of why now, to your point. The why now is because in requesting the liquor license, this became a central issue in the discussion before the planning board. And, you know, when the planning board had this issue come up as well, they thought it appropriate for Glenn Greenwood to bring these issues before the select board. So there's a reason for this now. It's nothing more than that. Bill?
You know, I think the other thing, Mike, was that people were saying the chickens were not being raised on their land, which we visually all have seen. They're across the street.
Yeah.
And you know, we as a planning board have an ordinance. We can't say, oh, we're going to close our eyes to this person or not. And in fact, yes, I guess some of the chickens were raised across the street. And I think, you know, I've been to enough farmers training, farmers marketing training, and there's enough literature out there. I think, Amy, you've written some of it, that all of us farmers are told to keep your books so that you can easily show the 35%. And I think it's important to know that it's 35% of what is sold at the farm stand. It's not, I sold $500,000 chickens to some restaurant somewhere, and it's 35% of that.
No, it's the retail component of the farm stand in particular, associated either with that farm or other properties that farmer owns.
This frustrates me because I'm a farmer. I respect the whole thing. I was there for Jeremiah and Nicole when they went for this. And I just, as a planning board member, it's very frustrating. We have an ordinance to meet, the state standards. We were told one thing, and now the planning board's just kind of being like, you don't matter. And my major concern, I'll recite it again, is safety. I'm very concerned about somebody living right up there.
Board members, comments, questions, concerns?
Is Larry Shaw your, point person for the planning board? It sounds as though they engaged with him and he didn't bring up any issues.
No, he did.
He's the building inspector here in town,
I
and
know.
he came before the planning board and actually raised these concerns. Not the 35% issue, that was, as I stated, that was addressed by the planning board, mainly centered around stimulated by the discussion of the liquor license. But Larry raised these concerns before the planning board, which is why the planning board then turned to Glenn to have him compile the memo and look into some of these issues.
So Larry doesn't consult with the planning board about permits or anything like that?
About who gets a permit or who does not?
Any
No.
permitting activity doesn't let the planning board know?
Unless there's a violation, he wouldn't have a reason to, unless he feels that there's a violation of for example, he goes on site and he finds that somebody's violating the permit, then he would report that back to the planning board and or the select board for enforcement. But otherwise, if people are complying with the permits, he has no issue to come before the planning board.
So I'm just curious, did he go and look at the building and then determine it possibly was unsafe or out of compliance with a permit, or did he just, I wish he was here to talk about it.
It was my understanding in his conversation before the board is that he noticed the advertising of activities on the stand and what the stand looked like did not comply with what the permits that were requested indicated. And therefore, he came before the board because he saw that the public was using this And in his discussions with Jeremiah prior to that, nobody had indicated the public was going to be part of this. It was an indication that it would be coolers and storage, not actually, serving food and drink. Jeff?
I think members of the public actually reached out to Brian.
But he did not actually go and observe anything. He's just going by what residents reported to him and what he
Right,
saw.
he would have had no reason to if it was an agricultural building that was supposedly not equal to the regulations of the building code.
So he's arguing that it's not an agricultural
No,
building.
that's not what I said. I said that he would not have had to do an inspection.
So
Correct,
what-
correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that that building that is constructed is covered under this agritourism ordinance, and so therefore it's subjected to different standards of building
If I
permit?
could just jump in real quick, here, I know you haven't had your chance yet. So, the Vernon's understanding, they do not want a building that is unsafe for the public, and nobody wants that. The public coming to their property, as Jeremiah talked about at the beginning, is how, modern day farmers make these agricultural enterprises viable. So, public getting their own property, that is for everybody. But the Vernon's understanding from what they said, when they said, what do we need for a permit to put a roof and semi-walls, is you don't need permitting, a building permit for an agricultural structure. So in their mind, we're going to be using this for our agricultural activities, including agritourism. So we don't need a permit to build what we have built. Now, I understand that there is an interpretation that that's an expansion of agritourism activities, subject to site plan review. But what I'm trying to explain is how they could have thought agriculture structure. I'm hearing from the town that we don't need any building permit.
Boy, requirement under 674